December 1994. Shigenori Tokanaka sat in a cramped Tokyo office, his eyes fixed on sales reports that would determine the fate of a multi-million-dollar gamble. Sony, a company built on the physical, tactile brilliance of the Walkman and the Trinitron TV, was trying to invade a market ruled by the iron-fisted whims of Nintendo and Sega. Their weapon was a grey plastic slab called the PlayStation. That day, they sold 100,000 units, sparking a revolution that would turn a consumer electronics firm into the undisputed king of the living room. For 3 decades, the contract was simple. You bought the box, you bought the disc, and you owned the experience. But the era of the physical artifact is being systematically dismantled. Beneath the sleek, futuristic fins of the PlayStation 5 lies a predatory new architecture designed to migrate the player from owner to tenant. Sony isn't just selling hardware anymore, they're installing a digital toll booth in your home that never stops charging. This is the story of how the king of consoles is turning your hobby into a permanent, inescapable subscription. For the better part of 20 years, Sony's dominance was built on the concept of the prestige object. When you bought a PlayStation 2 in the year 2000, you weren't just buying a toy, you were buying the most affordable DVD player on the market. It was a centerpiece of the home, a machine that functioned entirely offline, fueled by silver discs that you could trade, sell, or keep on a shelf for a lifetime. There was no fine print, there was no terms of service update that could suddenly render your library unplayable. This was the golden age of the hardware cycle, where Sony made its billions by selling you a gateway to a world you actually owned. But the corporate landscape began to shift as the high-definition era arrived.
The PlayStation 3, launched in 2006, was a beautiful disaster, a $600 behemoth that nearly bankrupted the gaming division. Sony realized that relying solely on hardware sales was a volatile, dangerous game. They needed something more stable. They needed recurring revenue. They needed a way to reach into the customer's pocket every single month, regardless of whether a new blockbuster game had been released. The transformation began slowly, almost imperceptibly. In 2010, they introduced PlayStation Plus. At the time, it was marketed as an optional luxury, a small fee in exchange for a few free games and cloud saves. It felt like a gift. But by the time the PlayStation 4 launched in 2013, the trap was set. Sony followed Microsoft's lead and locked online multiplayer behind the PlayStation Plus paywall. Suddenly, the console you bought was a lobotomized machine unless you paid an annual ransom. You could play the game you bought, but you couldn't play it with your friends unless you kept the subscription active. The frog was in the water, and Sony was slowly turning up the heat. Today, that heat has reached a boiling point. Sony has rebranded and expanded its subscription services into a confusing web of tiers: essential, extra, and premium. It is a calculated move to mimic the Netflix model, creating a walled garden where the value isn't in the individual game, but in the access to the library. On the surface, it looks like a bargain. For a monthly fee, you get hundreds of titles. But look closer and you see the erosion of the medium. When games become part of a rotating buffet, they lose their status as permanent art. They become content, disposable, ephemeral, and subject to the whims of licensing agreements. The dark truth of this transition is the death of digital ownership. In late 2023, PlayStation users received a chilling notification. Hundreds of Discovery TV shows they had legitimately purchased through the PlayStation Store were being deleted.
Not just removed from the store, but wiped from user libraries. Because the licensing deal had expired, the purchases vanished. This is the ultimate goal of the subscription pivot. Sony wants to move away from a world where you own a library and into a world where you license a service. If you stop paying, the library disappears. If Sony loses a legal battle with a studio, your bought items disappear. You are no longer a customer, you are a subscriber, and a subscriber has no rights to the product, only temporary permission to view it. This shift is mirrored in the hardware itself. The latest iterations of Sony's consoles are moving aggressively toward a diskless future. The PlayStation 5 Digital Edition was the first shot across the bow, offering a cheaper entry point in exchange for total reliance on the proprietary PlayStation Store. Without a disk drive, you are a captive audience. You cannot buy used games at a discount. You cannot borrow a game from a friend. You cannot find a bargain in a clearance bin. You must pay exactly what Sony tells you to pay when they tell you to pay it. The recent launch of the PlayStation 5 Pro took this a step further, shipping a $700 machine without a disk drive included. To play the physical media you already own, you must buy a separate $80 attachment. It is a deliberate friction designed to make the physical world feel obsolete. Why is Sony doing this? The answer lies in the cold, hard mathematics of Wall Street. Hardware is expensive to manufacture and has low profit margins. Software sales are better, but they are unpredictable. But subscriptions? Subscriptions are the holy grail of modern capitalism. They provide average revenue per user, or ARPU, that investors can track with surgical precision. By turning the console into a subscription hub, Sony creates a sticky ecosystem.
Once you have a library of free monthly games tied to your account, you are psychologically trapped. To cancel the subscription is to lose years of digital progress and a massive collection of games. You stay because the cost of leaving is too high. This strategy has become even more desperate as the cost of game development has skyrocketed. A modern Sony blockbuster like Spider-Man 2 or The Last of Us Part 2 can cost upwards of $200 million to produce. If a game flops, it can crater a studio. To mitigate this risk, Sony is obsessed with live service games, titles designed to be played forever, filled with battle passes, cosmetic skins, and microtransactions. They aren't looking for a game that you finish and put away. They are looking for a digital habit that you fund every payday. The subscription model is the perfect delivery mechanism for this kind of addiction. However, the human cost of this corporate metamorphosis is starting to show. In 2023, Sony hiked the price of PlayStation Plus by as much as 35% across the board. There were no new features, there was no added value, it was simply a naked exercise in price gouging, betting that the stickiness of the ecosystem would prevent users from revolting. They were right. Despite the outcry, the revenue continued to climb. Sony has realized that as long as they hold your digital library hostage, they can dictate the terms of your hobby. The danger extends beyond the wallet. It threatens the very preservation of gaming history. In a subscription-only world, games that aren't performing on the service are simply deleted. They aren't just out of print, they cease to exist. We are moving toward a future where the classics of our youth are locked behind a premium tier, rented back to us at a premium price, with no way to save them for the next generation.
The hardware that once stood for innovation and freedom has become a sophisticated piece of DRM, digital rights management. We are witnessing the end of the console as we knew it. The box under your TV is becoming a thin client, a mere terminal for a cloud-based future where Sony controls every byte of data. They want to move beyond the box entirely, pushing PlayStation onto PCs, mobile phones and tablets as long as you pay the monthly tithe. The console wars are no longer about who has the fastest processor or the best graphics, they are about who can build the most inescapable subscription prison. Sony's journey from a scrappy underdog in 1994 to a ruthless subscription hegemon in 2024 is a masterclass in corporate evolution. They took the passion of millions of gamers and slowly, methodically converted it into a recurring line item on a balance sheet. They replaced the joy of collecting with the anxiety of access. The grey box that once promised a world of play has been replaced by a white tower that demands a world of payments. The glossy trailers and the soaring orchestral scores of their exclusive games act as a beautiful distraction from the decaying state of consumer rights. We are being told that convenience is worth the price of ownership. We are being told that a library of 1,000 games you don't own is better than a shelf of 10 games you do. But as the prices rise and the discs disappear, the reality becomes clear. The PlayStation is no longer a portal to another world. It's a high-tech lease on a digital life that can be revoked at any moment. This is the story of the end of ownership. This is the story of the corporate greed that turned players into tenants. This is the cold, calculated truth behind the blue glow of the PlayStation logo. We didn't just buy a console, we signed a contract we can never cancel. This is the story of how Sony killed the console to save the corporation.